Welcome, the anointed ones. Some people don't plan to defeat you, they plan to outlast you. That sentence alone explains more about this situation than most court transcripts ever will. Because what you're watching unfold isn't just a legal process, a delay, or a rescheduled date. It's a quiet expectation, an unspoken assumption, a long, patient bet placed on time doing what they couldn't finish themselves. Here's a documented fact most people don't like to talk about. Prolonged legal delays statistically lead to withdrawal, mental collapse, or disengagement from cases far more often than outright loss does. Not because the truth disappears, but because the human body eventually gets tired of carrying stress without resolution. Systems know this. Lawyers know this. Abusers know this. Delay is not neutral. It's a pressure tool, and someone somewhere was confident you wouldn't still be standing when this date came back around. That's the part that doesn't sit right once you really see it. They didn't just expect time to pass. They expected you to fade, to get sick of it, to break financially, to crack emotionally, to quietly disappear into a version of yourself that no longer had the energy, clarity, or nerve to show up. Some even made peace with the idea that you'd be a footnote by now, a tragic outcome, a convenient silence, a sad story told with a straight face and zero accountability. And yet, here you are, alive, present, functioning, still breathing, still thinking, still capable of walking into rooms you were never supposed to re-enter. That alone has already ruined somebody's long-term plan. You can almost hear the internal panic disguised as professionalism, the forced calm, the sudden scrambling masked as confidence, the polite smiles doing overtime. There's a dark kind of humor in it too, if we're being honest, because imagine placing a bet on someone not surviving, only to see them show up on schedule, properly dressed, mentally sharp, and very much inconvenient. That's not just awkward, that's spiritually embarrassing. This isn't about revenge or drama. It's about exposure, about what gets revealed when someone survives a timeline that was designed for their disappearance. And once you understand that, this story stops being about a court date and starts being about why your continued existence was never part of their forecast in the first place. Number one, they built their entire legal strategy on the assumption that time would erase you. What most people don't realize is that some battles are never designed to be won quickly. They are designed to be waited out. From the very beginning, their confidence didn't come from strong facts or clean hands. It came from patience mixed with cruelty. They believed that if they stretched things long enough, life itself would do the dirty work for them. Stress, exhaustion, isolation, financial pressure, and constant uncertainty were supposed to wear you down more effectively than any direct attack ever could. Delays weren't accidents, postponements weren't setbacks. Every pause was part of a quiet calculation. How long can a human carry this before something gives? They expected you to lose stability, lose support, lose hope, or lose yourself. Not because you were weak, but because most people eventually crack under unresolved pressure. They place their bet there, on the slow grind, on time becoming their accomplice. What they didn't understand is that time doesn't erase everyone equally. For some people, time exposes things. For others, it forces growth. While they assumed you were unraveling behind closed doors, you were adapting. You were learning how to breathe under pressure, how to survive long nights without answers, how to move forward while carrying uncertainty like extra weight. That kind of endurance isn't accidental. It's built through necessity. Their strategy required you to cooperate by breaking down. It required you to self-destruct quietly, so no one had to take responsibility. It required your absence more than their innocence. And that's why your presence now feels so disruptive. You weren't supposed to make it this far, with your mind intact and your body still functioning. Every extra day you stayed upright was a day their strategy weakened, Time was supposed to erase you, not sharpen you. Instead of fading into the background, you became harder to ignore. You outlasted the very delay that was meant to defeat you. That's the uncomfortable truth they're now forced to face. The plan only works if the person disappears. And you didn't. Number 2, your continued existence is already evidence that their narrative failed. From the very start, they created a story about you, a version that was convenient for them, easy to manipulate, and designed to vanish under pressure. Every rumor, every accusation, every half-truth was carefully constructed to make your eventual disappearance believable. They counted on it. Their narrative wasn't about reality, it was about expectation. They expected that by the time this court date arrived, you would be too worn down, too disoriented, or too overwhelmed to confront the truth. They assumed the system, the delays, and the weight of your own circumstances would finish the job they couldn't do themselves. But that assumption has already been shattered. Simply existing in full force disrupts their entire plan. Your presence is evidence of survival, endurance, and clarity. It proves that the story they spun, the one meant to take you out quietly, was never strong enough to withstand the real you. Every day you continue functioning, showing up, thinking clearly, and holding your ground. Their narrative collapses bit by bit. Time that was supposed to bury you has instead highlighted your resilience, exposing the cracks in their lies. What's more, your existence forces accountability. The narrative they built thrives on silence, absence, and invisibility. It relies on people not showing up to contradict it. But now that you are here, present and unbroken, every word, every plan, and every manipulation is on display. The longer you stand, the more their assumptions crumble, and the more impossible it becomes for them to maintain control. Your continued existence is not passive. It's an active disruption. It's proof that no amount of waiting, scheming, or strategizing could overwrite your reality. Their version of events depends entirely on your erasure, and the fact that you are still here exposes the lie. Simply by living, by showing up, by refusing to disappear, you've already proven that their carefully constructed world was built on a false premise. And that truth will become undeniable the moment you step into the courtroom. Your survival isn't just endurance, it's evidence, and evidence always speaks louder than manipulation. Number 3, they mistook your isolation for deterioration. They watched you step back, disappear from their view, and assumed that you were falling apart. Every absence, every quiet moment, every step you took away from their prying eyes became, in their minds, proof that you were crumbling. They didn't consider that silence can be deliberate, that withdrawal can be strategy, that stepping out of sight doesn't mean giving up. They read your independence as weakness, your boundaries as breakdown, and your patience as paralysis. They were wrong on every count. While they were busy interpreting your quiet as surrender, you were quietly building your resilience. Time alone gave you clarity they could never provide, strength they couldn't manufacture, and perspective they would never understand. Each moment they thought you were deteriorating, you were actually recalibrating, reorganizing, and preparing for the moment you would return fully intact. The isolation they assumed would break you only polished your focus and sharpened your instincts. They never accounted for the fact that human beings respond differently to pressure. Some fold under scrutiny, some crumble under expectation, and some use it to refine themselves in ways others can't see. They saw what they wanted to see, fragility, but they ignored what was actually happening. Your strength was consolidating quietly, far from their attention. That misunderstanding became their blind spot, a critical error in their calculations, because they believed the story they told themselves over their coffee and whispered in boardrooms. By the time you reappear, their assumptions about your breakdown have already failed. They've placed bets on a version of you that never existed, counting on invisibility to disguise weakness. But what they overlooked is that isolation can also be armor. It can be a shield and a laboratory combined, a place where patience becomes weaponized, resilience becomes visible, and mental fortitude becomes undeniable. Every step back you took was not a retreat, but a repositioning, a quiet preparation for the moment when their assumptions would collide with reality. They mistook your absence for deterioration, but in truth, it became the proving ground for the strength they refused to see, the endurance they never predicted, and the force that would one day confront them fully. Number 4, they underestimated how protected people endure pressure differently. They assumed that pressure works the same way on everyone, that if you apply enough stress, enough waiting, enough uncertainty, anyone will eventually break. That's a mistake born of arrogance. They never understood that some people are built differently, that some people carry an internal shield no one can see and no one can touch. Their plan relied on your collapse, but what they didn't account for is that certain kinds of pressure don't destroy, they refine. Every delay, every obstacle, every tactic meant to wear you down ended up doing the opposite. It strengthened your focus, honed your patience, and clarified your priorities. The energy they thought they were draining from you was actually being redirected into endurance, resilience, and awareness. They assumed the weight of months, maybe years, of delays would crush your spirit. Instead, it forced you to find a rhythm in chaos, to hold steady while everyone else assumed you were faltering. Their confidence in their strategy came from a place of ignorance. They measured people by their own limitations, not yours. They also failed to understand that being protected doesn't always mean being shielded physically or socially. It can mean mental clarity, emotional stability, and an ability to navigate extreme pressure without losing control. They expected visible cracks, loud breakdowns, and mistakes. They were waiting for the signs they knew from experience, but protected endurance is subtle. It doesn't scream, it doesn't plead. It moves quietly, deliberately, accumulating strength while opponents think they are winning. By the time they realized nothing was breaking you, it was already too late. Their strategy of attrition, of relying on time as a weapon, had failed completely. What they expected to weaken you became the foundation of your power. They assumed everyone bends under the same force, but you proved that pressure is not universal. It tests, it refines, and for those who are prepared, it creates an advantage no one else can anticipate. They underestimated you, and that mistake will follow them all the way to the moment they have to face you. Pressure doesn't defeat everyone. It exposes those who were always stronger than anyone realized. Number 5, your presence forces them to confront what they tried to delay into irrelevance. They counted on absence, delay, and the passage of time to make the situation fade into the background. Their plan wasn't just about creating confusion or spreading false narratives. It was about waiting until the moment no one remembered, no one cared, and no one was prepared to challenge them. They expected time itself to become a shield, a way to bury accountability, and a way to turn their actions into a quiet, unresolved story. They assumed that by the time this court date arrived, everything would have dulled, and the weight of their responsibility would be inconsequential. But your presence changes everything. By showing up, fully intact, aware, and prepared, you disrupt every expectation they relied on. You transform what they thought would be forgotten into a moment of confrontation they can't ignore. Their attempts to delay, manipulate, or obscure the truth were never designed to withstand someone who refuses to vanish. By simply being here, you force their carefully constructed timeline to collapse, forcing them to face evidence facts, and consequences they assumed would never resurface. Presence carries power because it refuses erasure. They thought the months, maybe years of waiting would wear you down or make the situation irrelevant. They didn't anticipate that your endurance, your attention, and your determination would turn time into a weapon against them. Every delayed tactic they deployed only made their miscalculations more obvious. The longer they tried to manipulate events, the sharper your clarity became. Every expectation of invisibility, of retreat, or of fatigue failed the moment you showed up fully prepared to stand your ground. By confronting the moment they assumed would pass unnoticed, you exposed the truth they hoped would remain buried. Your presence transforms delay from an advantage for them into a liability. Every calculation they made about diminishing relevance collapses under the fact that you are still here, still aware, and still insisting that what they tried to suppress be addressed. Simply by existing in this space, you force accountability, visibility, and confrontation that they never planned to face. Number 6. They assumed shame would finish what they started. From the very beginning, they counted on you internalizing every whisper, every accusation, every slight that came your way. They assumed that constant exposure to judgment, distortion, and ridicule would quietly break you from the inside out. They thought shame would be the instrument to finish what threats, delays, and manipulation couldn't. They expected that eventually you would start believing their narrative, start questioning yourself, and begin to collapse under the weight of their carefully orchestrated criticism. But they didn't understand how certain people respond to shame. For some, shame is a weapon. For others, it's a mirror. Instead of letting it erode your sense of self, you used it to clarify who you are and who you are not. Every attempt to guilt you, to make you doubt yourself, or to force you into compliance backfired because it hit someone who refused to internalize the lies. They were trying to get under your skin, but they didn't realize that your mind was a fortress, and their tactics only highlighted their own weakness. They expected public opinion, hidden whispers, and subtle manipulations to push you into isolation and self-blame. They assumed that you would eventually fold quietly so no one would notice. Instead, every ounce of shame directed at you became evidence of their desperation. The fact that you remained steadfast, composed, and aware turned their weapon into proof of your integrity. What they meant to use as leverage became the opposite. It showcased your clarity and revealed the fragility of their own position. They underestimated the effect of endurance and self-knowledge in the face of calculated pressure. Shame doesn't break everyone. Some people use it as fuel, as a refining fire that strengthens resolve and sharpens focus. While they expected you to shrink, you stood taller. While they expected confusion and weakness, you maintained perspective and composure. Their miscalculation wasn't just about strategy. It was about the fact that they were trying to manipulate someone who refuses to be manipulated. Shame was supposed to finish you, but instead it became a spotlight on your strength and their failure. Number 7. They never planned to face you fully alive. From the beginning, every move they made was designed for a version of you that didn't exist anymore. A tired, worn-down, defeated version that could be pushed around, silenced, or manipulated without resistance. They calculated every delay, every manipulation, and every whispered lie, assuming you would arrive at this moment fragmented, broken, and too exhausted to defend yourself. They never anticipated meeting someone who had endured every challenge intact, who had survived their tactics not just physically, but mentally and emotionally. Their strategy relied on absence and weakness. They expected that by the time this court date came around, you would be diminished by fatigue, uncertainty, or fear. They built a plan around what they thought would be your defeat, never considering that surviving under pressure could actually sharpen you instead of breaking you. Every day you showed up, every time you maintained composure, every instance you refused to be manipulated, their entire strategy unraveled. They assumed your survival would be passive. They didn't plan for it to be active, aware, and undeniable. They also underestimated the kind of presence that comes from enduring extreme pressure. Some people can be visible and alive, but their strength is quiet and imperceptible until revealed at the critical moment. You became that person. While they assumed your silence was weakness, it was actually preparation. While they assumed your absence meant vulnerability, it was actually consolidation. Their expectation of a broken version of you collided with the reality of someone fully intact, someone whose presence demanded acknowledgement and recalculation. Every tactic they relied on, every plan they executed, assumed they wouldn't have to face someone fully whole. They counted on time and pressure to dim your fire, but the opposite happened. Your survival disrupted their timeline, exposed their miscalculations, and forced them to confront a truth they never prepared for. You didn't just survive. You thrived. You arrived fully present, fully aware, and fully alive. And that fact alone reshapes every expectation they had about what would happen when the moment finally came. They never planned for the living version of you, and that oversight will define how everything unfolds from here. Number 8. Your survival forces accountability they thought time would bury. From the very beginning, their plan relied on the quiet erasure of consequences. They believed that if they could stretch out time, delay the process, and keep pressure on you, accountability would eventually dissolve. They assumed that long enough, the truth would be forgotten, witnesses would move on, evidence would gather dust, and no one would have the energy to see things through. They counted on time to do the work that responsibility should have done. But time doesn't work the same way for everyone. While they relied on its eroding power, your survival became a constant, undeniable presence that refuses to be ignored. Every day you stayed engaged, aware, and prepared, chipped away at the protective illusions they built. Their expectation that you would fade quietly collided with the reality of someone fully alert and fully present, someone unwilling to allow their narrative to stand unchallenged. Your mere existence is a reminder that actions, no matter how carefully concealed, cannot escape consequence when the person affected refuses to disappear. What they never accounted for is that accountability is forced, not optional, when someone refuses to vanish. Their strategies, whispers, and delays may have worked on others, but your endurance created pressure back on them. Every postponed date, every delay tactic, every attempt to wear you down only made your position stronger. They relied on you breaking first, giving them space to avoid scrutiny. But your presence inverted the dynamic. You became the one forcing clarity, truth, and responsibility into a situation they assumed would be resolved in their favor. Your survival is a statement that truth cannot be postponed indefinitely. It proves that delaying justice does not nullify it. It simply postpones confrontation until the person capable of holding them accountable refuses to disappear. Every expectation they had about fading you into irrelevance has failed. They now must answer for actions they assumed would never be challenged, for consequences they hoped would never be faced. By surviving, by showing up, and by maintaining presence, you've turned the very passage of time into a weapon against them, proving that accountability cannot be buried as long as you remain standing. Number 9. They relied on emotional attrition, not truth. From the start, their entire plan was built on wearing you down rather than confronting reality. They weren't confident in facts, in evidence, or in honesty. They were confident in human fatigue. They counted on emotional attrition, on the slow grind of pressure, anxiety, and uncertainty to break you before truth ever had a chance to speak. Every delay, every manipulative tactic, every whispered rumor or calculated slight was designed to erode your energy, your focus, and your clarity. They thought that if they could outlast your patience, manipulate your emotions, and exhaust your resources, the truth would no longer matter, because you would no longer matter. What they didn't understand is that emotional attrition works only if the person it targets is dependent on their approval or easily destabilized. They assumed that fatigue, stress, and mental strain would weaken your capacity to resist. They expected that eventually your nerves would fray, your composure would crumble, and your judgment would falter. They expected that under the relentless grind of delays and pressure, you would make mistakes, lose focus, or even give in just to find relief. They treated endurance as a rare commodity, not realizing that some people thrive under pressure, gaining focus and clarity while others break. Instead of succumbing, you used their tactics as a testing ground for your resilience. Every attempt to push you emotionally, every act designed to destabilize you, became a mirror reflecting their desperation and weakness. While they were focused on bending you, they didn't notice that their actions were sharpening your awareness, clarifying your priorities, and reinforcing your mental boundaries. Their reliance on attrition backfired because it assumed uniform vulnerability, and you proved that human endurance is not predictable when paired with clarity and self-mastery. By the time you arrive at this court date, their entire strategy has failed. Emotional attrition has not eroded your power. It has revealed their weakness. They relied on a weapon that could only work if you were ordinary, and you are anything but. Truth never needed their help. You did. Number 10. Your body outlasting the stress already disproves their assumptions. They believed the human body has limits, and they counted on yours being reached long before this moment. They assumed that under constant stress, prolonged uncertainty, and relentless pressure, you would crack physically. They imagined fatigue, sleepless nights, tension and anxiety would weaken you to the point where your mind and body could no longer function effectively. They expected visible signs of strain, a collapse of endurance, a version of you too worn out to show up and face what they created. That was their calculation, and it was dangerously narrow. What they failed to account for is that some people's endurance under stress doesn't follow the patterns they know. The same tactics meant to diminish you, instead reinforced your strength. Every sleepless night, every moment of worry, every challenge they threw at you became part of a crucible. Your body carried what they thought would break it, and in doing so, it revealed a resilience they never anticipated. They assumed that stress works the same on everyone, that pressure will yield predictable results, and that time and strain will eventually level all resistance. You disproved every one of these assumptions simply by surviving. The reality is that the body and mind are deeply connected, and stress doesn't always lead to collapse. It can sharpen focus, increase awareness, and build endurance when someone refuses to let it define them. They never predicted that prolonged pressure could be transformed into preparation, that their manipulations could be internalized not as weakness, but as a source of fortitude. Every beat of your heart, every decision made under strain, every step forward despite exhaustion became proof that their plan underestimated the strength inherent in someone unwilling to break. By outlasting the stress, your body became evidence against their expectations. Their assumption was that the human vessel has a breaking point, and that by now you would have reached it. Instead, you arrived fully capable, fully alert, and fully functional, proving that their strategy was built on flawed premises. Your endurance is undeniable, visible, and impossible to ignore, and it has already rewritten the rules they thought governed your survival. Number 11. They thought you'd self-sabotage before justice ever showed up. From the very beginning, they counted on human nature to do their work for them. They assumed that under relentless pressure, delays, and uncertainty, you would make a misstep, an error in judgment, a slip of emotion, a choice that would undermine your credibility. They expected that exhaustion, frustration, or fear would eventually push you into doing something that would confirm their narrative without them lifting a finger. Their plan relied not on strength or skill, but on predictable human weakness, and they assumed you would be no exception. What they didn't account for is that some people can operate under pressure without losing control. They didn't foresee that their tactics, intended to provoke mistakes, would instead sharpen your focus. Every attempt to push you into a corner, every manipulation designed to make you falter, ended up strengthening your awareness. While they expected emotional eruptions or hasty decisions, you responded with deliberate thought, measured action, and calculated restraint. Your ability to navigate extreme stress without self-sabotage became a force they could not anticipate. They assumed time, stress, and isolation would erode your judgment. They expected the combination of frustration and uncertainty to trip you up, to create openings they could exploit. But your endurance and self-discipline turned that assumption on its head. By refusing to react in ways that could be used against you, you maintained control of the narrative in ways they never planned for. Their confidence in eventual errors revealed their reliance on the ordinary rather than the extraordinary. They bet on predictability, and you proved them wrong. The truth is that self-sabotage is easy to induce when someone is worn down, manipulated, or doubted. But you resisted every trap, navigated every pressure point, and preserved your credibility throughout. Every expectation they had of a misstep evaporated in the face of your composure and strategic endurance. Their plan assumed human frailty, and your refusal to give it to them demonstrates something far stronger: the ability to survive, persist, and outlast without betraying yourself. By the time justice arrived, they discovered their assumptions were worthless because you were ready, intact, and unstoppable. Number 12. Your clarity now exposes how distorted their version always was. They built a story about you, a carefully constructed narrative meant to control perception and manipulate outcomes. Every claim, every rumor, every half-truth was strategically placed to create confusion, doubt, and a version of reality that worked in their favor. They counted on the fact that prolonged pressure, delays, and emotional weight would fog your own memory, distort your perspective, and make it difficult to hold the truth clearly. They assumed that by the time this court date arrived, their version of events would dominate, and your voice would be too fragile, too uncertain, or too fragmented to challenge it effectively. What they didn't anticipate is that time doesn't always blur memory, it can sharpen it. While they thought months or years of waiting would make you forget, distort, or doubt yourself, you were observing, remembering, and connecting the dots. Every inconsistency, every manipulation, every attempt to reshape your story was catalogued in your awareness. Their plan depended on your perception being clouded, but your clarity grew stronger with each passing moment. Their version of events relied on assumptions, distortions, and the hope that no one would notice the contradictions. You noticed. Clarity has a quiet but powerful force. It allows you to see motives behind actions, detect patterns in lies, and recognize the fractures in narratives built on manipulation. Every tactic designed to weaken you only provided insight, revealing exactly how flawed and self-serving their story really was. Their version looked credible to outsiders because it relied on confusion, selective memory, and hidden agendas. But your endurance didn't just keep you standing. It gave you insight, precision, and the ability to expose the truth with undeniable clarity. By the time you confront them in court, Your clarity will make their distortions obvious. What they counted on to dominate the narrative will crumble under the weight of your presence and awareness. Their lies were built for someone who would lose perspective over time. You didn't. Your survival didn't just preserve you. It illuminated the reality they were desperate to hide. And now, nothing in their carefully crafted version can stand against what you see, remember, and reveal. Number 13. They expected you to lose belief in yourself first. From the very beginning, their strategy relied on eroding your inner compass. They assumed that under relentless pressure, constant delays, and the weight of false narratives, you would start questioning your own judgment, doubting your own perception, and eventually believing the very lies they crafted. They expected that before any court date, before any testimony, before any confrontation, you would have already surrendered to uncertainty. Their plan was never just about winning a case, it was about wearing you down to the point where you no longer trusted yourself. What they failed to realize is that belief in yourself is not something easily taken away by others, especially when it's grounded in clarity, experience, and survival. Every attempt to manipulate, mislead, or intimidate you collided with a foundation they never considered: your understanding of your own truth. While they thought time and pressure would corrode your confidence, it only strengthened your awareness. Every delay, every tactic meant to shake you, became an opportunity to reinforce your sense of self, to trust your instincts, and to separate fact from fabrication. Their miscalculation was assuming that doubt is the default reaction to adversity. They counted on ordinary responses: confusion, frustration, second-guessing, or despair. But some people operate differently under pressure. Instead of losing belief in yourself, every challenge sharpened it. You didn't internalize their distortions, you observed them. You didn't collapse under weight, you adjusted to carry it. Their expectation of self-doubt was precisely what never materialized. By maintaining belief in yourself, you denied them the leverage they relied on. Their entire approach depended on you losing internal trust before they ever had to confront external truth. You refused to play that game, standing firm in your own awareness, your judgment, and your integrity, forced their assumptions to fail. The person they expected to crumble under scrutiny is not only standing but ready, fully aware, and unshakable. Their failure to account for your inner strength is what turns their calculated strategy into a liability, and your unwavering self-belief becomes the proof that nothing they tried could control you. Number 14. You weren't preserved by accident. You outlived an expectation designed for your disappearance. From the very beginning, their calculations were clear. This timeline was meant to end without you fully present. They relied on every delay, every manipulation, and every subtle push of pressure to create a version of events where you would fade quietly, where fatigue, frustration, or fear would finish what they couldn't. They assumed that by the time this moment arrived, you would be gone, physically, emotionally, or mentally diminished. Their plan counted on your disappearance, and they built everything around that assumption. What they didn't anticipate is that survival isn't passive, it's active. You weren't just holding on, you were navigating every challenge with awareness and strategy, turning every tactic meant to weaken you into a step toward endurance. Every sleepless night, every moment of stress, every attempt to manipulate or intimidate you only revealed how strong you were. Their expectation that you would vanish underestimated the very human force of someone who refuses to be erased. You weren't preserved by luck or coincidence. You were preserved by your ability to survive, adapt, and remain fully present despite everything thrown at you. By the time this court date came around, their assumptions had already failed. The version of you they expected, broken, absent, or compromised, never existed. Your continued existence exposed their miscalculations, and overturn their strategy. Every delay they counted on to make you irrelevant became a stage for your endurance. Every tactic meant to intimidate or wear you down became evidence of their own desperation. They never planned for a version of you that could withstand it all and still arrive fully intact, aware and prepared. Outliving their expectation isn't just a victory. It's undeniable proof that some people are built to survive timelines that were never meant to favor them. You arrived at this moment not by accident, but because nothing they tried could override your presence, your awareness, or your determination. Your survival is not only a challenge to their plans, it's a testament to the fact that the human spirit, when determined, cannot be predicted, controlled, or erased. Conclusion. The story of your survival, endurance, and unwavering presence is not just a personal victory. It's a living testament to the fact that plans built on underestimation, manipulation, and delay are doomed to fail when faced with someone who refuses to be erased. Every tactic designed to wear you down, every whisper of doubt, every carefully constructed lie, every delay meant to silence you, has instead highlighted your strength, clarity, and resilience. From the very first moment, they assumed you would crumble under pressure, self-sabotage under stress, or fade quietly into irrelevance. They counted on time to do what they could not, finish the story for them. Yet here you stand, intact, aware, and fully present, turning their expectations inside out. Your survival is more than endurance. It is evidence. Evidence that their narrative was flawed, their strategy miscalculated, and their assumptions about human weakness dangerously incomplete. Every day you remained steadfast, every boundary you maintained, every moment you chose clarity over chaos, has chipped away at the illusions they relied upon. The delays intended to diminish your power only revealed it. The emotional pressure meant to confuse and control you only clarified your truth. And the absence they hoped would break you only fortified your resolve. By simply existing, by showing up, and by refusing to give in to fear, fatigue, or manipulation, you force accountability, expose lies, and confront truths that they thought would never surface. Your presence rewrites the rules they assumed governed their success. What they planned, as a quiet, unremarkable conclusion to their schemes, has become an undeniable display of endurance, intelligence, and unshakable self-belief. You are living proof that survival under pressure does more than preserve. It transforms, empowers, and commands recognition. If this message resonated with you, if you see yourself in this journey of resilience and triumph, make sure to subscribe to the channel for more brutally honest truths and extraordinary insights. Hit that like button, share this video to awaken others, and leave a comment with your thoughts. Your voice matters here. Every share, every interaction helps spread the message that survival, presence, and clarity are forces no one can ever erase. Stay strong, stay aware, and never underestimate the power of your existence. God bless you.